If everyone could please find their seats, we're ready to get started. This morning we have a special guest with us, Representative Donna Lichtenegger, who's the chairman of the Higher Education Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives, and Donna's very acquainted with our institutions. Her husband was a former curator, and Donna, you'd like to say a few words? Thank you. Wherever there's a microphone right up there, or wherever. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I get all the short jokes, so I just own it. You know, you can't beat it, so join them. I am so honored to get to speak in front of you today. Being that my husband was on the board for 10 years, and I'm going to brag a little because he was president for 2 of those years. And I don't know of any other politician, maybe one, that's ever gotten the honor to speak to you all. I am Appropriations Chair. We will start what we call conferencing on Monday. I know that Steve Knorr gave you an update yesterday, so you kind of know the ins of what's going on for all the campuses. What I plan on doing is we have myself and 3 other Republicans and 2 other Democrats that will meet with 2 senators, and we will sit down and we will work this out. Obviously, I don't make promises, but I will do my best. I always tell the members of the House that if you want good economic development, give more money to higher education. That's my belief, and I will fight for it. What's basically going to happen is we'll get in this room and we'll sit down, and they're going to say what they believe, and we're going to say what we believe. And obviously, the speaker would like me to fight for the House side, but there's certain parts of this budget that I think are really important. What I don't like is that in order for higher ed and elementary and secondary ed to get more money, they had to pummel House Bills 10 and 11, which are our social services. Social services do a lot of good, and so I hate the fact that we have to pit one against the other. But we'll work it out, and it will be a lot of hard work, but this is going to be done probably this week. The speaker wants this done Friday. And that means if we don't go home until either Friday or Saturday morning, that's what it's going to mean. He wants this done at the end of the week. So by the end of the week, we should have a bill that we will send back over to the Senate. Well, the Senate and the House will agree upon. We'll get this thing passed, and we'll get it to the governor, and then it's up to the governor. I do want to acknowledge the fact that he did give 2 50-50 things out this week, which was nice. And that's all I have to say, but thank you again. I am very honored to be here, and I know you guys have a lot of work to do, and I commend you for what you do, because I know how many days my husband spent during his time on the board doing nothing but working for the University of Missouri and all 4 of its campuses. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. The next item on the agenda is the campus advising panel discussion, and Steve Graham, I believe, is going to introduce it, and then we will hear from the different campuses.
That's right. I'm Steve Graham, Senior Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, and the focus of our panel this morning is to focus on student advising, and as we all know, it's the year of the student. This is something that everyone's very concerned about, so we're going to, let me just introduce the panel real quickly. Kim McNeely, Associate Vice Provost for Undergraduate Advising and the University College. Jim Spain from MU, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies. Jeff Caulfield, Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies at S&T. And Beth Eckelkamp, who's the Associate Dean of Arts and Science at UMSL. We're going to let Kim just provide a brief overview to kind of set the stage for it, and then we'd like to engage you as quickly as possible in conversation. And these are the pros from the campus. They do this every day, and so they should be able to address a lot of the questions that you have and provide some details. So without further ado, Kim.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. Again, what I'd like to do is emphasize that my task in this first part of this discussion is to, what my dad used to say, wet your whistle, right? To provide some catalyst ideas, certainly ideas you as board members may already be thinking about, but again, just to provide some of the breadth of the ideas and best practices that are occurring on each one of our campuses, we wanted to start. So I'm going to warn you that this is going to be a quick review, certainly not meant to be exhaustive, but please write down your thoughts and your questions, because the majority of this time we absolutely want to be directed by your questions and things that you want to discuss with us. So jumping right in. Best practices certainly are things that are guiding our decision-making on each and every one of our campuses. And as our team collectively came together, we wanted to put these out as catalyst thoughts for our discussion today. Number one, certainly you can't start thinking about academic advising best practices without thinking about that most important outcome between an advisor-student discussion that leads to that optimal course selection. In today's time, that definition of optimal certainly varies greatly, and I would anticipate it might be something that we would want to talk about more further. But if you consider optimal as setting a student up to increase their likelihood of graduation in a timely manner, what we now know about guidelines, particularly starting even in the first semester in the first year, is that we should be setting a clear foundation for academic and career goals, which many times should include ideas of enrollment in a 15-hour enrollment in their first term, opposing this early idea that we should reduce the academic load as students enter in some ways to soften that transition issue. In addition, we should be thinking absolutely strategically to meet our students where they are, which includes a clear assessment of their academic readiness as they enter into our campus, and building our curriculum in that initial term to start with where they are and move them purposely forward in key skills. In addition to that, our old processes of advising students many times was a semester by semester step that we opened the door each term to students as they entered our offices. What we clearly now know as a best practice is that we should be demonstrating exactly what the student will experience from start to finish, being much more clear about courses that they do not have discretion over because it has implications to their graduation success, but also be very clear about ways that they can fine-tune our curriculums, our degree requirements to meet their personal interests and values and expertise areas that they hope to develop further. Best practices in advising today absolutely has to be a part of the team for early and strong intervention. Again, reflecting on how we used to do things, one of our key issues in providing support services was to be sure that we had access to support services available to students. What we now know is access simply is not enough, that we have to be those individuals that are the connections. And frankly, our advising teams are the hub of that connection. They have connections with our faculty to understand how our students are doing better in classes. We need to garnish that input, pair it with what conversations the advisors have had individually with students, and be very specific to link them up to resources that are on our campuses, resources that are around in our communities, not just academic resources, but other issues that will help engage them in our academic learning, from extracurricular events, activities, a wide variety of things. The other key issue is an emphasis on early. Much of what our previous advising focused on, frankly, after we had students enrolled in class, was that week before that initial drop date, where the key decision needed to be made whether the student could actually pass the course or not and should be advised to drop a course before that failing grade might show up on their transcript. That simply is not best practice anymore. And what we know is that if we intervene, use our advisors to intervene in collaboration with our faculty in those first 6 weeks of each semester, that's when we can change and enhance their study strategies, get them engaged with appropriate support services that absolutely change the trajectory of their performance in the class from likely failure to success. Best practices again today, our students are communicating to us more and more that the reason why they're coming to a four-year institution is so that they can pursue their occupational and career goals. We absolutely have to make clearer links to our academic advising starting in year one. Absolutely talking about general education from our advisors in different ways. Too many times early in advising, our advisors with well-intentions have said things like, you just need to get through the general education and then you will get to the good stuff. We need to change that messaging. Frankly, a lot of the work of the AAC&U on what employers want in outcomes focuses and has modified our curriculums in general education, and it is a clear foundational point for our students, and it is our job, our advisors' job, to help reflect that relevance to our students early on. Secondly, a critical point comes in sophomore year, which many times is just seen as a treading water point. That's the time when our students need to be envisioning what their experience, their vita will look like at the point of graduation. And academic advisors are absolutely well positioned to start asking those questions about when should you be thinking about internships, when should you begin pursuing possible research. Is study abroad an option that will provide you with an international perspective, a skill set that you want to find and distinguish yourself at the point of graduation 2 years before that point so that we can actually help our students maximize their experience. The things that I've talked about so far are clearly a change in the way that we've interacted with students. Early on in our field, the idea of advisors clearly telling students, prescribing exactly what they need to do with not a lot of discussion about goals and ideas and thoughts. We simply need to move to this more developmental model. The idea that early on our students need to have clear support, absolutely, but our goals are to teach them to self-monitor, to take ownership of their plans, to manage their resources, and actually absolutely maximize their time with us. As you've sat in an advisor role, once you see a student go from doing school, because that's what they'll call it, because their parents told them to finding that passion, that clear fit, you know that as we've facilitated those conversations, as my dad used to say, Katie bar the door, typically there are not things that can get in their way, even if barriers come across. And so that should be the new perspective of our advising teams. What I'd like to do now is shift to talk more about a system responsibility. We are changing expectations on our advisors. We have incredibly dedicated advisors that have been in that role for 10 and 15, 20 years. We're changing expectations. So part of our responsibility to these advisors is to absolutely provide ongoing professional development and training for every single one of the folks that are engaged in this. It is unfair of us to set new expectations without providing that support to allow those folks to get there. We are doing great things on our individual campuses. We have clear participation in NACADA, which is the National Academic Advising Association. But most importantly, I'm very proud of what our institution, our system has stepped forward to do in creating the President's Retention Summit and Professional Advisor Development Series with funds that I believe originally grew out of a GEO's retreat to support and absolutely take advantage of the amazing expertise. Frankly, before I started engaging in some of these discussions, I was not aware of the resources on the other campuses that we could collaborate. So absolutely critical. Moving forward, the other things our system absolutely has to understand is that as we move and support this many students with this many individual decisions to make, with changing plans, we need to empower our advisors to be strong advocates for our students, especially when, unfortunately, things sometimes go wrong. And not to primarily support the system, but to be clear, to bring those students' issues to the table so that we can quick those concerns, so that not at the detriment of the students, so that the student can move forward. Equally important, we need to take advantage of our advisors and what they're seeing and how students are living and moving through our policies and procedures, and use that collective voice to improve our systematic processes. Again, a clear perspective that is incredibly invaluable to us. And then finally, I'd like to end with advising services need to be contextual. Sometimes there's an assumption that there is one panacea, there is one model that works well in every single unit at every single institution. And what we absolutely know at this point is that just simply is not the case. As we look at our advising systems, there is one clear perspective that's important, that we absolutely have to have ways to identify students on our campuses that are thriving due to our support and our challenge, but we also need to be able to quickly identify groups that are not, where we simply are not meeting our needs, and have ways and courage to adjust and change our systems to address those as quickly as possible. One of the, again, things that I would like to talk about that this system has done that I've been so excited about is to bring us all together in an initiative that's called the Comprehensive Retention Initiative. And the folks around the table presenting with me are certainly clear members of that. We have brought folks across all 4 campuses together to talk about those tools that we did not have access to support some of the agenda items that I've talked about before. And collectively, we have identified some key new technology that you'll see listed here, a class scheduler. For example, that may seem like a small tool. Until you have sat with a student trying to navigate their first set of, wait, I see some people smiling. How many of you have sat through that? Only to find out that the puzzle pieces that they are trying to fit together simply will never fit. Right? We have used this tool, implemented. It's been amazing. It's allowed us to help communicate those non-discretionary courses in a way unimaginable that we didn't have before. It has reduced the amount of staff time that we need. So not only has this improved our students' experiences, it has also been a more efficient use of our resources and both important agenda items. Retention-focused software, we'll see the items there. In addition to that, updating our very old degree audit system, most importantly so that we can attach to that an integrated degree mapping program, which was my original point, that we absolutely need to be able to provide a start to finish personalized degree plan for every single student. And more importantly, we need to capture those plans in a way that we as institutions can provide and ensure that course capacity is available for them in the optimal times in the semesters moving forward. And then clearly our next step is to move forward with analytics. And then my final slide, Steve, how am I doing? 10 minutes, right? My final slide wants to go back to that contextual issue again. One of the things that CRI collectively we understand is that certainly there are commonalities, but there are also contextual issues on each one of our campuses that we need support in. And part of those CRI funds that I should brag are, thank you, President Wolf, are over $2 million, startup funds that we could have never gotten things off the ground with before. Part of that funding has to do with each of our campuses reflecting on specific contextual needs that can absolutely help us move this retention degree progress movement forward. And in many ways, this is a nice starting point to talk about contextual things. And with that short 10-minute catalyst, I am going to pause for the appropriate wait time because, again, we want this discussion to be driven by your questions, things that you all would like to talk about, and I am absolutely sure that our panel can talk in great detail, probably more than you'd ever want. We're welcome to stay until tomorrow if you'd like, but I'll defer to your questions at this point.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Obviously, we had her on speed talk mode because we wanted Kim. I want to shout out to Kim, too. Kim is the provides direction for this Comprehensive Retention Initiative, or CRI, which we'll probably mention a lot. And it is the benefit of $2 million that we put into the system so that we could all buy the same software, work together. So we've had a team working on it for a year and a half. And we felt it was best to have a campus lead so that someone's down on the ground that could help direct us. And she's done a great job, as have all these other folks that represent their campuses with other colleagues. So we're going to try to engage you with questions. I'm sure you have a lot in terms of how advising works. I'll turn back to the board chair if you have a question you'd like to start with, or maybe anyone else.
I'm unprepared, but the question that I have, and I guess I probably hear this more than any other complaint from parents, are the child or the student, I shouldn't call them children, but I guess they are, the student who is a second semester senior and, by the way, needs 2 more classes to graduate. At what point are we trying to intervene to get them on track to graduate, hopefully in 4 years?
Who wants to take that first?
I can start with that. Certainly, that's regrettable when that happens, and occasionally that will happen. But I think all 4 campuses, I know on our campus we have people both in the registrar's office and affiliated with the advising offices that are looking 3 or 4 semesters ahead. Sometimes it could be a mistake by an advisor, but sometimes it could be the lack of follow-through by that student. I know on our campus we do a pretty good job of advising and getting them to set up a plan, but once they leave your office, they can kind of sign up for whatever they wish, and we have to monitor that a little bit closer. But as Kim mentioned, I think this degree planning, schedule planning, mapping it out is going to help those issues a lot, but I don't know what others do.
Might talk a little bit about the degree audits that are available on all campuses. Go ahead, Jim.
It's about the process from start to finish, starting at the freshman level all the way to the senior level, and making sure that we have processes mapped out that we can track and monitor that so it doesn't get to that point, right? Because at that point, it's a failure of the system to try and intervene earlier, and that's something that Kim mentioned that's really driving, I think, all of our efforts, is a process that moves upstream to where we're at a point of earlier and earlier intervention. You catch it early, you can fix it easier. You catch it late, it's more difficult to correct. The academic mapper and planner is certainly going to contribute to that. Our new degree audit system, which will bring us into a system that's much more functional and much more user-friendly, both for the student as well as our academic advisors, is going to be critical to that. A lot of our units, Curator, are using graduation contracts or plans. So by the time you get to 75 hours, in the fall, mostly, I spent time with several of my academic advisors going through, and so the next 2 years, for you to graduate by this date, these are the courses we're going to take in the fall and the spring, and the fall and the spring. And they sign it, and I sign it, and it's checked by the dean's office to make sure I didn't. So what we're going to be able to do, though, is automate a lot of that to make it more efficient. And one of the things that Kim identified is by improving our efficiency, it also allows us to push to deeper level conversations with the students that goes beyond just the, are you taking this class and this class? But so why are you taking that? And how is that leading to this goal that you say is so important, which brought you to Mizzou or S&T or UMSL or UMKC in the first place, right? Now, I will say, sometimes we make a mistake, but I also know the number of times I sign an exception on behalf of the provost that holds the student harmless when it's our mistake, okay? We think it's in fairness to the students, as long as we're confident it was us and not the student trying to navigate an easier path to that end goal that they're trying to get to.
Surely students wouldn't do that, would they?
I think we've all been students.
We want them to learn to be strategic with their efforts, but to the good, right? Right. The only thing that I would add, and very quickly to that, is that taking that developmental approach, that part of an advisor's role is to teach students to self-monitor using particularly the much more robust tools that we'll be able to put in front of them in the upcoming terms once we've implemented that. So that frankly, we are recruiting an own self-advisor, but teaching them to use the very same tools that our advisors would. So most importantly, the ultimate goal would be that they would check this and plan to make sure that they had everything in place. But the new systems, because they won't be on paper, will allow us to swoop in when they've made an error outside of those critical points. But the key is to teach them to take ownership of their planning and monitoring, and teach them to use these new age tools that we're about to move forward with. We have to get the tools in place first, but then that educator role is going to become even more important, and a better use of our early on time to set them into that level of ownership.
So when will you first try to introduce the student to the system? Will it be sophomore year, freshman year?
Summer orientation.
Summer
Yep.
orientation.
Okay.
Right out of the gate. Right out of the gate.
And the tools that we're using already are introduced during orientation, so students they can see the plan moving forward. Just to add to what Kim was saying, every unit is really striving to decrease the number of advisees that each advisor is working with. And we find that if we are able to allow our advisors to really develop relationships with students, those errors are minimized because there's a partnership and a really strong advocacy for the students. And we absolutely see the benefits of that when advisors have an opportunity to develop those kinds of relationships.
Do you mind if I'm sorry, go ahead. Your question, I'm sure, is better than mine.
No.
How do you mesh the professional advisor that is well-versed and a subject matter expert in the operational activities to get from point A to point Z, Z being a degree, with the faculty advisor that is deep in that subject matter expertise that he or she has? How do you mesh the activities of the subject matter advisor with the professional advisor, if I could call it that?
Sure. I think I'll just start. We have every imaginable combination of efforts if you look at different colleges and different departments. But I think the really awesome partnership that comes from the content expert working with the student to talk about careers, to talk about opportunities for directions in their degree, meshed with a professional advisor that can help students keep on track in those other areas that sometimes faculty members are less interested in, is one of the best partnerships that we see on our campus.
Yeah, I would say, at least on the S&T campus, the procedure we're developing and have developed in a couple departments is we embed the professional advisors in the departments. So for instance, mechanical and aerospace has a professional advisor that handles the details of class selection and progress towards degree. But if she or her staff get questions about, gee, do I want to be an aerospace engineer and work for Rolls-Royce, or would I rather be a mechanical engineer? Those kind of questions, she has a cadre of faculty that she can refer them to that are in connection. In terms of, I think what Kim mentioned, developmental advising, I think of that as developing the whole person, career orientation, maybe doing some undergraduate research. So there's that connection.
We almost approach it, President Wolf, as like a coaching staff or a student success team. And so the advisor is going to help you perhaps with one component, but then as you interact with that faculty member, especially as you move up into your junior and senior level coursework, then your faculty take on a different role, a position coach, if you will, or a mentor, so that student, again, it's part of that developmental process. When that student is a freshman, they're maybe not ready to ask the right questions, but as they move to sophomore, junior, and they're working more closely with the faculty in the area that they've decided this is the path I'm going to take, then our faculty, and our faculty are working as academic advising club advisors and undergraduate research mentors, and so there are a lot of places that outside of the realm of academic advisors, and we have a number of faculty that are exceptionally good academic advisors that help with that nuts and bolts stuff. But then we've got a broad cadre that are also in that space of mentor, helping that student get to that next place within the discipline.
I want to give a shout out to the staff as well. Advising nowadays is not, when I started back in the Middle Ages in college, you know, it was basically you were lucky to find somebody and maybe talk to a faculty member. There were no professional staff. Now we have advisors in our Career Opportunity Center and financial aid. Every one of our students has a financial aid advisor assigned to them. The Student Affairs Division, we have student organizations. There are advisors that are staff advisors. It would be almost impossible to go through one of our institutions and not develop a close relationship with somebody on the staff or faculty, and maybe 2 or 3 somebodies who could be mentors, who could write you a good letter of recommendation, who could, I mean, it's so much better than it was in the 60s and 70s. I'm dating myself, but it's outstanding now. I'm not saying we don't ever make mistakes or we don't ever lose a kid because they didn't get good advising, but there's a lot of resources there on the staff, faculty side, as well as professional advisors.
So I have 3 related questions, and I'll get them all 3 out, and then you can give short answers to each of the 3. The first is that we often focus on wanting students to get through in a 4-year experience in most programs. So to what extent is scheduling, which you addressed earlier, one of the problems in being able to accomplish that, as opposed to changes in career direction or not knowing until your junior year or senior year what you really want to graduate in, as opposed to another alternative like liking the campus experience and not being ready to graduate, so dragging it out. And if it is scheduling that is a primary a block, then the next question, this is number 2, to the extent that we make more e-learning, distance learning available, can that be a solution to the scheduling problem for those core courses that they need for degrees that get filled up? So that's question number 2. And then question number 3 is, if education is a life learning experience, should we be worrying about 4-year graduation rates? If you charge by courses as opposed to by semesters, why not take 5, 6, or over the space of your life to graduate? Other than our peer comparisons for different ratings purposes, my mother didn't graduate until I went through the line for law school. She was in her 60s. She went back to complete. And I do think that universities ought to be more life learning experiences, partnering with businesses and so forth, and we shouldn't be so focused on the 4-year experience. So those are 3 related questions.
Okay, good point. And we could talk about some of the outside of class and the international, you know.
Maybe we'll get, can I address the scheduling and some issues as far as this idea of 15 hours of enrollment? I think one of the first things that we need to absolutely put out on the table is sometimes there are different perceptions in what is optimal course selection, and I love that we're coming back to this a bit. One of the things that we know early on in advising, there was this idea that we should reduce the academic load to reduce the impact of that transition, to reduce not 15 hours, reduce down to 12, allow students to avoid those core gateway skills, mathematics commonly that they were worried about, and those type of things. What we know about the data is that those decisions simply do not bear out, and that if we want students to understand their optimal path, that this is not a treading water first year, because what we know is that students who don't aggressively move forward and enroll in that first 15 hours If they start at 12, then they continue through to 12 because the rest of their life falls into place and they have difficulty, even if those students are 3.5 to 4.0 GPA students. So decisions that we're making in that very first semester actually matter. And certainly that's an individual discussion. Our parents and many of our students are coming in thinking, oh, I want to reduce that load. And so we have two conflicting messages that we need to really get out on the table, starting from that very first semester, because it is a leading indicator of whether students will graduate or not. Students at UMKC's campus that are enrolled in 12 hours are less likely to graduate in 4 or 6 years. Again, we have to put that information out on the table and discuss it within the context of that student's issue. The other issue about optimal course selection has to do with making sure that we have our curriculums engage students and evaluate their fit with that major early on. Years ago in particular, many of our areas didn't allow instructors in the disciplines to have interactions with students until 60 hours and beyond. What we now know is that we have to clearly designate, and many of us are doing it through major maps, to talk about critical courses that should be taken early on so that the students can evaluate that best fit, so that we can encourage that Plan B discussion early as opposed to later. 70% of our students will change their minds about majors. We have to put that out on the table and have early discussions about that. Some of those changes are in disciplines more specific, from biology to microbiology, but sometimes they're all over the board. And if those decisions are happening all the way through until they're a junior and senior, then their outcome is not what we want for them. And so facilitating ways, I'm pretty passionate about a university college format, because that provides that early exploration early on to make sure they're progressing through curriculum that takes those to those next steps. That's my.
There you go. Other?
Our students are coming in on average with on average 14 hours that they've completed before they get to our campus. So they start with us with a Head Start, dual credit, AP credit, that kind of thing. So a 4-year graduation rate, we'd seem to have a head start on that. And obviously our 4-year rate has gotten better, but there's a gap between our 4 and our 6. So what's contributing to that gap? Is it scheduling? We don't think so, okay? We've looked for enrollment bottlenecks. For example, in nursing, physical therapy, a bottleneck was our human anatomy course. It involved a cadaver lab, and there's only so many students you can put around a cadaver and still have a meaningful learning experience. But we pulled together the faculty teaching that course with the faculty who were using that course in their curriculum, and we redesigned that course through a course redesign process that was a partnership again across our system campuses. We were able to streamline that. And John, I used to get calls from parents when I first started in the provost office, frustrated about that course as a bottleneck. I've not gotten a call in the last 4 years. So what we've tried to do is identify the enrollment bottlenecks. So is our online helping us with that? Absolutely, it has. Will it allow us to eliminate those places? Where it can, we're going to use it very strategically, but I can't replace a chemistry lab with an online lab, especially as I'm moving up to the more advanced chemistry courses. Should we worry about time to degree? The national conversation about that concern is cost. How much debt are students accumulating? And in fact, I will say, based on what we understand with our own students, more often than not, it's how much that extra course costs me that makes the decision on whether I take the extra course or whether I stay with 13 hours. Okay? Because
Can I
Sure, you
interject on
can,
that?
absolutely.
So that may make a bigger difference on your residential campuses, which are more Columbia and Rolla, than on the metropolitan campuses, where people may be working full-time and trying to take a load, but they may have less debt if they're able to stretch their courses over than if you try to force them into a 4 or even 6-year model.
You bet. Well, and I don't think any of us force the 4-year model. It's I think Kim mentioned in her opening remarks that we meet the students where they are at. And I think that would be the philosophy across all 4 campuses of individualizing that approach so that we are working with the students in their space to get them to their goal within the constraints that each one of them bring to us, be it time, finances, life in general with a full-time job and family that they're trying to work around as well.
And I think for the non-traditional students, their earning capacity greatly increases once they've earned the degree. So we do want to try to find that balance between making good progress to graduation so that they are able to earn more, and also being realistic about the load so that they can handle it over time.
One point that John brings up, I think, is a really good one, and we had discussions about this as we were prepping for the board. It's also come up during the CBHE hearings, and that is that employers are asking for a pretty sophisticated employee right out of college now that can work as a team, good critical thinking skills, communicates both in writing, you know. And so we talked a lot about the out-of-class experience, leadership roles, study abroad kinds of things that students get engaged in that sometimes do, the co-ops where they're working full-time. And I don't know if maybe I've said enough on that, but it does kind of allude to the last point you made, which is sometimes 4 years isn't the best plan. If 4.5 or 5 is better when you come out with this full skill set, having been engaged in some of these
Right.
solar power card or.
Certainly, that's, and I think Chancellor Schrader is going to update you on our strategic plan, but the item number 1 on our strategic plan was all of our undergrads are going to, starting with this fall's class, going to be required to have a significant experiential learning activity before they can graduate. It's now become part of the graduation requirement. That's a great thing, but if that includes a co-op or a study abroad or internships that get extended into a semester, certainly that's going to extend their time to graduation, but for a very good reason. And so employers, as Steve said, employers are wanting students to come out mature, ready to go, experience with teamwork, experience on, in our case, student design teams and so on, and that takes time. So I think there's some really positive things that could cause the time to graduation to be a little bit more than 4 years. So you're right. I mean, it's a lifelong learning experience. We're hoping to inculcate that into our students before they graduate. And it's not just classroom experience. It's out-of-classroom experiences. They're spending 3 or 4 hours a day in a classroom. They're spending 20 hours a day outside of classrooms. There's a lot of opportunity there for some really significant learning.
But I think it's important for us to acknowledge the impact that finances is having. And you know, students who at one time were able to hold a 10-hour-a-week job and generate enough supplemental income to fill the gap are now working 30 and 40 and 50 hours a week. And it's just impossible for them to take 15 hours, especially as they move up into the upper division, and for them to balance that commitment and be academically successful. I mean, that's, and so, you know, we know through our analysis, finances is the #1 reason students leave us before they graduate. Most of the students who leave our campus are eligible to come back. Last week, I've got 3,500 kids, children, kids at Mizzou who are on our campus this semester with less than 100 credit hours, who aren't yet registered for the fall. 65% of those students we expect to come back, but they've not enrolled yet. They don't have a hold, but when we ask them why they're not coming back, they tell us, because I can't afford to pay the bill. Now, of the other 35, 40%, over half of those are not coming back because I've got a financial hold on their account, where they've got a past due balance of over 60 to 90 days. And so finances for us is one of the key issues that stand in the way of students being able to persist to a successful completion of degree. And that influences time to degree because they've simply had to back off on the accelerator and take more time because of the financial demands that have been placed on them to be able to just balance their budget, so to speak.
Go
Jim,
ahead.
Going back to your summer intern, or summer your orientation.
Yes, sir.
So if I'm a student coming there, do I meet my advisor right then?
Yes, sir.
And I stay with that person throughout my,
Not
College
necess-
career?
Not necessarily. And
but is that the idea, that you want them to stay with that person or not?
not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Because, I'll have an advisee that will meet me over the summer, and they say, is there any way I can not work with Dr. Spain?
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
And so.
Yeah.
No, I get
For
it.
very obvious reasons.
It may work both ways, too.
Exactly, right. As students change their major, and as Kim said, we all have a large number of students, I'm going to align that student with an advisor that really knows that new major in that academic area, because they can give that student the best coaching available, right? So now, ideally, it can work that way.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it works that way every time, right?
Got it.
Jim, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How do you, a little different area, how do you identify that student, that may be an outlier student who, despite a proactive advising program and monitoring their progress, all of a sudden is not proceeding the way you would want? And it may be for unidentified reasons, health reasons, financial, problems at home, nothing to do with class selection or academics.
Sure.
But may need some services beyond the services you're able to provide as an advisor. How do we identify that student and try to get them back on course for graduation as close as possible to the time that they would have?
Sure. If a student comes to us and identifies those needs, obviously we intervene immediately. But as you know, most students are loath to admit that they're having difficulties. We have an academic alert process where faculty members, if they notice that a student hasn't been coming to class, hasn't been succeeding in the way that they had been earlier, can file an alert that goes on our campus to a student retention services office. And then a specialist in that office will aggressively reach out to that student to connect them to the resources. So that's one great pathway. This has all been part of the funding from the Comprehensive Retention Initiative, Unified Advising Record that we've been able to use to put some of those interventions in place. So that's one way.
Yeah, we're working to get this all sort of, I don't want to say automated, but an online interconnected communication system where not just the academic advisors, but the counseling and wellness center could be informed, financial aid could be connected in. And so we can write notes in this. It makes sense, we probably should have done this 15 years ago in terms of electronic communication, but that's the hope with this. Well, the generic name is Starfish, but each of our campuses has a specific name so that we can all interact. It's a work in progress, but hopefully we'll get there.
And for some of our students, it does take the entire campus village to help them graduate. Some of our students just cruise right through. But we have so many supports in place, but we just have to be able to connect the students to them. So that's a really great question.
The only thing that I would add on that very issue is intervening early is the key. And so one of the things that our Starfish allows us to do is to get minimal kind of concerns that collectively from the student's experience on our campus. And so if we would get an alert that says the student is having difficulty in a single class, but life isn't too bad, that's one thing. But now this system allows us to collect all of that low-level alert. And so when we see a student that is having a low-level concern launched in every single one of their courses, then that leads us to understand that there may be a much broader issue and we can engage in that sooner. By collecting what we all see on our campus, that allows us to get to that more holistic, many times intervening early on the student's behalf.
Sure, Graham. So I've got a list of 3,500 kids. I know who they are. All of those lists were distributed to the academic units where those students are at. And each one of those students are going to get an individual contact from an academic advisor in the 3 weeks after spring break. I'm going to collect information and I'm going to know, okay, so what was happening with those students? What was our follow-up? On March the 9th, we had 1,467 students that owed the campus more than $2,000 on their student accounts. totaling amount owed of $7 million. Our cashier's office has got 6 peer advisors who personally call those students. On March the 19th, we'd gone from 1,400 students to 666 students, okay? So it's about the process that we have in place that identifies these students, whether it's a financial, whether it's an academic, whether it's through the Student Health Center, having a process in place that assures that student is getting the contact and the support that he or she needs so that they have every opportunity to be successful. But it's an intentional process. And our Connect, our Starfish system, is allowing us to connect those processes in a way that 5 years was absolutely absent on all of our campuses.
As you can see from the tone, it's a much more assertive process than ever before. That my advisors, when we went through school, didn't do that if you went in to see them. So I'll just turn to the board chair. We've pretty much used the time that was allocated, but it's your discretion.
Well, I only have about 8 more questions, but
It's a very great.
probably, I want to say I'm very impressed by what you're doing, and I very much appreciate it. And please, if there are things that the board can do to help you with anything except money, which we don't have,
Darn,
Steve,
I'm just gonna write it down.
please let us know, because I really appreciate it.
On behalf of my colleagues, if I may, the fact that the board has identified this as the year of the student and having the leadership of the system make that a high priority, and having each of our campus understand that the Board of Curators cares at this level about student and student success, you've helped us in a way that I think you probably will never understand and appreciate, because that message resonates with our faculty, with our staff, with our students, and with their parents. And let's not underestimate the importance of parents understanding that we understand that when they bring their sons or daughters, grandsons or granddaughters to our campuses, they say to us, "We trust you." And what you've heard here today is our collective efforts to honor their trust each and every day on our campuses on behalf of this group. So thank you.
Tracy, I think our student has a question, so.
Right. Necessarily, we've been focusing on at-risk students, but I wanted to ask about the other extreme as well. So some of the best advice that I received as an undergraduate was to consider double majoring before I had even started classes, because it would be easier to drop one of those majors later on than to add later or to switch. And so I wanted to ask if this new system will not only allow some of those more exceptional students coming in with a lot of AP credit maybe, who might be rushed into those advanced classes a lot sooner, if it would encourage them even to consider the option of a double major, and if those conversations are happening.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. I think the key is expectations being high from the get-go. So we all have selective admission criteria. We are getting fantastic students, and we have to set that bar really high for them, set the expectation high, and I agree 100%. Everything that we're doing sort of leads to that effort.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, 'cause I completed both of them in 2 minors because day one they said it's better to start this way and pull back than to change. So
You bet.
thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists.
Chancellor Schrader?
While she's coming, is there a legal impediment to the advisors contacting parents nowadays?
Do we have our students sign FERPA waivers when they come in?
They may, they don't have to, so it's optional.
So particularly on finances, if you have a financial hold on them, sometimes parents give them money and then don't realize that school bills aren't being paid.
I have a conflict of interest in answering that question. As a parent of an existing student, so yes, I know what you mean.
Chancellor?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and visit with you today. I certainly hope you are enjoying your time here at Missouri S&T, and I want to let you know that it is our pleasure to host you on our campus. As requested, I'm going to give a focus just on our strategic plan and some of the highlights that have occurred as we've been implementing it. And our plan, as you may recall, is entitled Rising to the Challenge, Missouri S&T's Strategy for Success. Some of these accomplishments we'll be handing out, and I'll be talking about some of those handouts as well. Our vision for Missouri S&T is to be the leading public technological research university for discovery, creativity, and innovation. And if we drill down just a little further into our vision, we will cultivate curiosity, creativity, and confidence in our graduates. We will be the institution of choice for partners around the world who are seeking a highly qualified, talented, and entrepreneurial workforce, innovative research, relevant educational programs, products, and services, and technology and ideas that will help solve some of the great challenges of our time. To achieve this vision, we worked through an inclusive and a very collaborative process to identify our strategy, and what you see here is our strategy statement. Missouri S&T will provide by 2020 a top return on investment among public research universities to our students, employers, research partners, and donors through extraordinary access to renowned expertise, services, and experiential learning opportunities. And you might ask, well, why is this our strategy? Back when we started this process, we sought to have a strategy that was both time-bounded and measurable. And it identifies who we are serving and also the advantage that our campus has that supports the achievement of our strategy. So we selected 2020 for a number of reasons. At that time in 2013, it seemed like it was far enough away that we actually could do some very bold things and be able to get results. Yet it was not too far away to let up on the urgency of the tasks before us. And also, 2020 is the year that we will be 150 years old as an institution. The measurement that you see is the section that is highlighted in green, and that is providing a top ROI, a top return on investment. We know from visiting with our key customer groups that maximizing that ROI is very, very important. They invest in us, and we in turn add value and bring value to that partnership. By including this in our strategy, it really helps us double down on something that we've already been doing and have been recognized around the state and the nation for doing. But it's also something we can continue to improve on even more. The who of our statement are our core customers. That group is highlighted in purple on the screen. When we first started, we had 36 stakeholders that we quickly whittled down to 6 key customer groups. And those are undergraduate students, research-based graduate students, distance and online students, employers, donors, and research partners. So 6 very simple groups. Finally, we wanted a strategy statement that plays off our unique advantage and our strengths and also sets us on a path to be even stronger. And that's the orange part of the statement that you see there. And it really says that here we provide extraordinary access to experts, renowned expertise, to services and experiential learning opportunities. And we are continuing to strengthen that more and more through our plan. You, I believe, have a few handouts in front of you. So this is just a reminder of our strategy statement. On the back are the levers in case you want to look at any of those as we're talking about them. They are arranged by our 4 themes. And so what I have here is just a description of those 4 themes. The first is to develop and inspire creative thinkers and leaders for lifelong success, and that's not just students, but it's everybody involved in the S&T family. To enhance reputation and raise visibility. To achieve sustainable growth, to ensure the best return on investment. And the 4th is to increase and facilitate meaningful access to and interaction with renowned faculty, staff, and services. We have made significant progress over the past 2 years in these theme areas. And on this slide, I've simply listed the levers that we are currently working on now that fall in those categories. In addition to the sheet that summarizes levers, we have a 1-page summary of some of the highlights, recent highlights of our accomplishments. So that's something that might be helpful for you to look at later as well. So allow me just to share a few highlights with you. I'll begin with theme 1. As mentioned earlier in the advising discussion, we continue to make progress on implementing a required significant experiential learning component for all of our undergraduates, regardless of major. And soon, all students will have completed a project like Whitney Metcalf, who's pictured here. She's a petroleum engineering major who helped design a human-powered vehicle and then tested it at the national level in competition. Or students may have a co-op or internship, or they may be doing undergraduate research, or study abroad, or have a leadership position. Again, the degree programs are determining what fits for their students. To demonstrate our commitment to this, we recently allocated an additional 5,800 square feet to the Commerce Student Design Center, and that design center houses 14 student teams. To foster innovation and also help catalyze good ideas, we developed an innovation team. And so far, we've had 13 innovation proposals that have been submitted to that team for review. They act like a venture capitalist group, thumbs up, thumbs down. And 6 projects have been funded, including an initiative to introduce new technology into the Writing Center to improve the student experience. These proposals are coming from all over. They're coming from students, they're coming from staff, they're coming from faculty. And the campus originally provided a recurring budget of $75,000 to this team. We are working to increase that in order to demonstrate its importance and also engagement, increased engagement. This team also took on a process. So we're thinking of innovation in many places, in a laboratory, we're thinking of it in a classroom, but also we have to look at the way we do business. And so I've challenged this team every year to really look at a process. And they took on our scholarship award process. And they streamlined it to make it more customer-friendly for the students, for our donors, and also for the academic departments. This successful design, which launched in the fall, has allowed us to offset more than $750,000 in general revenue funds. And that's because we are using the resources that we have much more effectively. So in year 1, you can see that this innovation team paid for itself more than 10 times over. I think that's a pretty good success story. As a result of our plan, as described in Lever 2.7, we've changed the very structure of our university by introducing 2 colleges, the College of Arts, Sciences, and Business, and the College of Engineering and Computing. And the leaders of these colleges are with us today, so I'd like to introduce them. Dr. Ian Ferguson, who is the leader of our College of Engineering and Computing. Welcome, Ian. And Dr. Steve Roberts, who leads our College of Arts, Sciences, and Business. Welcome. Both of these people already have made tremendous strides to raise the visibility of our university here. They are powerful, powerful advocates for their colleges and the university as a whole. They are working together to bridge any gaps that would exist between departments and between colleges, and we're very grateful for that. We're fortunate to have them on board. They do play a critical role in advancing each of those 4 themes that I shared with you. In addition, Dr. Kent Ray is our Vice Chancellor for Global and Strategic Partnerships. Vice Chancellor Ray oversees international affairs, global and online learning, and a new Office of Corporate Relations. Centralizing corporate relations is actually a specific lever. It's lever 3.2 in the plan. So Dr. Ray is playing just a vital role in expanding our entrepreneurial efforts and improving our customer service across the globe. So let me share with you just a few minutes regarding our efforts to enhance our customers' return on their investment. And that, of course, is with our 3rd theme. This map, by the way, is courtesy of the publication of Business Insider. And they are consistently recognizing Missouri S&T and our great return on investment. One way we're providing a better return on investment is through the strategic initiatives on campus that we are supporting and investing in, and also through the strategic initiative funded by the University of Missouri System. In the past fiscal year, we received $500,000 from the University of Missouri System to expand 11 instructional laboratories, improve the equipment, and also be able to access those laboratories in a remote way. Originally, we were set to match that with $500,000, but there were so many great proposals and they were needed, so we dug down and found some additional funding from the university. And we were able to leverage that $500,000 with funding from our own budget reallocated, and also over $800,000 in gifts. So we took that $500,000 and turned it into nearly $2 million investment. So that is tremendous. We are currently looking for a way now to make that pilot a more permanent funding source. I also want to mention that our geothermal project, which we completed this past year, has reduced our BTU usage by 60% this fall. And that represents a reduction in usage and operational costs of more than $1 million. It also represents a reduction in our deferred maintenance of $60 million. So significant savings there for a very bold project. So the final area that I'm going to highlight is theme 4, and that is increasing access and interaction. Levers 4.5 and 4.7 focus on recruitment and retention of doctoral students and also reducing their time to graduation. And I'm very proud to say that as a result of strategic investments, together with the University of Missouri System, we have taken significant steps in order to do just these things. This year, we began accepting applications for the Chancellor's Distinguished Fellowship, which actually provides 3 or 4 years of full support with a $28,000 stipend, and also, in addition, some professional development funds. And these are for outstanding domestic students. And as you can imagine, we expect an investment like this will be a game changer in our recruitment efforts for top U.S. talent. And in addition, this year we also began offering the Missouri S&T Dissertation Completion Fellowship. So when you get to your last year, we don't want people to be distracted by having to have a job, or we want them focused and finishing. We want them writing and really ready to move on with their career. So this competitive university-wide program is designed to support outstanding doctoral students in that final year of their program. And that fellowship award is a 1 year full support plus a $24,000 stipend to help them focus on their scholarly writing and encourage timely completion of their degree. So I've told you a little bit about some of our successes, and I thought I would share with you 2 challenges that we see. The first is resources, probably not surprising. Our plan is really driving shifts in our strategic priorities and in our resource allocation and reallocation. But we do continue to be under tremendous pressure to do more with less. This pressure is also magnified by the growth that we've seen. We've grown 87% since the year 2000 and held pretty steady. I think now it's a 4% growth in faculty and staff over that same time. So there's no doubt we could make even more progress with more resources. What constrains us in particular on this campus are faculty, the number of faculty, capital, as evidenced by the condition Schrank Hall is in, and we're really rooting for that bonding funding, and then equipment. And you can see we're trying to really chip away at the equipment. There also is just the dramatic growth that we've seen and tremendous pressure, tremendous interest from prospective students, but also tremendous pressure from employers who want more and more of the quality graduates that we provide. However, when you think about it, this really is the reality of public higher education. And it's really continues to be incumbent on all of us to be very effective with those resources that we have, to maximize the efficiency, to take a look at processes and uncover better and innovative ways to allow that strategic growth. And I think that we need to do that in the laboratory, in the classroom, and also with the way we do business. So the second challenge is plan communication. There's a lot of moving parts in our plan. It's very complex. We have thousands of people working on parts of it. And much has changed on this campus since you were here last year. Much has changed not only internally with the structure and new leaders, as I mentioned, but also there have been changes to the physical campus, and we are trying to use the space that we have in the best way possible based on our space utilization study that I shared with you last year. Keeping the campus community and keeping our stakeholders informed about our many accomplishments, keeping them engaged in the strategic plan, and communicating why we're making these changes remains an imperative. In addition to regular communications about the plan progress in my monthly newsletter, last fall, we held a strategic planning summit for all faculty and staff, and we're planning to do that again this fall. On the first day, details about the plan and our progress were shared in a town hall style setting. And on the second day, the event was more informal, and we had the opportunity for some detailed conversations, and that was when I gave out the first Chancellor's Challenge coins, just to honor select individuals for their leadership, for their strategic vision, and for their efforts to implement the university's strategic plan. Finally, we created a one-page document, and that's the third sheet that was handed out to you. This is a dashboard of some of the metrics that are important to our strategic plan. And it really helps us keep our eye on some important metrics and understand where we are in our progress. All these materials are posted on our strategic plan website. We do like to keep very simple one-page visuals so that people can look in general and see where we are and how we're doing. But in addition, we have all of the details on that plan and in our progress reports so that individuals can go in and find exactly what they're looking for or the area that they are working on. So keeping the campus community informed about the plan and its progress and heading off change fatigue is really an ongoing challenge. So as you can see, Missouri S&T is at a pivotal moment in our history. We have tremendous momentum. I'm very, very proud of our strategic plan, but I think I'm even more proud of the people who have made it their own and who have been implementing and innovating in ways that I could not have anticipated when we started with it 2 years ago. We've accomplished much, but I think it's probably good to remember Robert Frost, who said, "We have miles to go before we sleep." But I can tell you that in our strategic plan, we have promises that we will keep. So, thank you so much for your time and attention, and I would love to answer any questions you may have.
Chancellor, I was looking at your benchmarks and metrics, and I was thinking back to what Dr. Spain had said earlier about finances for students, both on causing them to drop out. And I was noting that the freshman sophomore retention rate 80 dropped some to 83%. Do you have an opinion as to what percentage of those students are dropping out because of finances?
I have more than an opinion.
Okay.
Actually, we know that the top reason for those students dropping out is financial. And although we've moved up and down on that, we really haven't moved as many points as we see at some other institutions. So it's happened since about 2008 that there's been a drop in retention nationally, mainly due to financial reasons.
If they leave because of finances, what are the chances of getting them back? Are they lost, or do some of them filter back in?
Well, first of all, if students don't return, we try to contact them and find out why. And then we like to keep in touch with folks and perhaps provide them some additional financial counseling to see if we can identify ways to help them continue. We have seen students stop out for a semester or two and then come on back, and that's good to see. We have extensive financial counseling and workshops with all of our students. So we are trying to help them find their way through and identify opportunities. Let me speak for a moment about the scholarship process that I talked about when we redesigned that. Essentially, we did not have a centralized way of administering scholarships that were specific for departments. So different departments were administrating them. And only 20% of our scholarships were put in a standard database. So the students had to go around many different places to find out what opportunities there were. Needless to say, we didn't always award all the scholarships. So we went ahead and we put everything in one place in a database so that students can go one place and apply for any scholarship that they qualify for. We removed the administrative burden from the departments. They still make the decisions, but they don't have to worry about the paperwork. We moved those award time up to the January, February timeframe so that students know very early on what funds they have. The donors are thrilled because they see that their dollars are being used and they get a chance to meet. We send them a photo and the students write a thank you note. And so all of these things have come about because we really have taken this customer approach to heart. And we're looking at those 6 key customer groups day in and day out and trying to see how we can improve that. So we're getting better with the resources we had with regard to scholarships to help head off some of those students who might be thinking of dropping out because of financial reasons.
So your experiential learning here was a real eye-opener a couple of years ago when I came through. And I think it really is remarkable how important that is to your programs. I also understand that experiential and laboratory is an expensive part of education. So are you able to leverage adjuncts or I know that there's a limited availability of your graduates employed in the area and that many of them tend to go to the metropolitan areas, but do you have the ability to have people, St. Louis isn't that far away, that are graduates that come back that mentor in the experiential learning? Is there a way to leverage it so that you can expand upon that without increasing the load on your great professors?
That's a great question. Actually, we do have adjuncts in St. Louis who teach classes through our Engineering Education Center. So they're in St. Louis and the students are here. So we do take advantage of expertise in that metropolitan area. In addition, we have the design teams have advisors. Many are former students who worked on those teams. So we do have alumni and companies who are very interested in the student design teams and help them in terms not only financially, but also with their time and their counsel.
I do have one other question. Looking at student learning, I noticed that on the blended courses, blended, I trust being distance and regular classroom, you're only increasing from 27 to 30, only adding 3 blended courses over the next 5 years. And percentage-wise, perhaps the same amount from online, going from 320 to 375. I would have thought because you have a kind of some advanced professors that are pretty advanced in online distance learning, that you wouldn't be adding at least more blended courses, if not more online courses.
So I'm just trying to pick up those.
So at the very
I
bottom,
see.
under student learning, I kind of looked upon you as being one of the leading campuses in this, and it just doesn't look like the goal for 5 years is as high as I would have expected.
Well, and you are absolutely right. And if you take a look at that and move on over to our year 2 progress from baseline, that baseline being 30, for example, number of blended courses offered per year. We already are at 42, and that's an increase of 56% from our baseline year. But there's a gold star there, which means, yes, we've met our 2020 goal. We've exceeded it. And now, we need to sit down and say, reevaluate and say what should be the goal for this point. So you're absolutely right. And the numbers are going up dramatically with the number of projects that we have
You get a
in
gold
play.
star for that answer.
Other questions? Chancellor, thank you very much. I think this is probably a good time for a short break, and we could be back promptly at 10:35. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the University Systems President's Report. Tim?
Thank you, Chairman Cupps. I'd like to remind everybody that the reason why we have the theme of Year of the Student is because of Chairman Cupps's attention to students, so I appreciate that. Also, it's appropriate to recognize that our student representative to the Board of Curators, Tracy, has been very helpful in guiding these conversations. The discussion today I thought was very, very interesting. I thank Kim, Beth, Jim, and Jeff for their leadership on the 4 campuses in this important initiative, but there's also somebody else that I really would like to recognize and thanks. This comprehensive retention initiative that was funded by the system to the tune of $2 million would not have happened without a specific leader. It is Steve Graham. Where is Steve? Steve, let me just talk to you a little bit about how this came about and some other things that Steve's leadership has meant to the University of Missouri system. I didn't ask Steve to go look into this. What Steve recognized was we're going in 4 different directions relative to our retention initiatives and our purchase of retention software. He got his colleagues together across the 4 campuses and said, if we come together on a common solution and a common purchase of a software program and really share best practices across the 4 campuses, we might get that crazy wolf to fund this. And so he puts this proposal together of $2 million that had complete buy-in from the campuses, and that has resulted in a single purchase in a team that's building a software package 1 time versus 4 times, and they're sharing best practices. That's Steve's leadership. This is the second time that he's done this in my short tenure here as the president. The first time was something that not just helped the University of Missouri system, but helped the whole state of Missouri. It was Caring for Missourians. It was an idea, concept that met a need in the state as we were terribly understaffed relative to healthcare providers, from nurses to docs to pharmacists, dentists, the list goes on. And he offered up to the Coordinating Board of Higher Education, Department of Higher Education, the colleagues at COFI and the colleagues at MCCA, and as well as political leadership, the thought of if the state invests incremental dollars, challenge the universities to produce more healthcare providers. And that was funded, and we overproduced about 20 to 30% of the commitment of healthcare professionals. Whenever I go to the governor's office, they talk about Caring for Missourian, but they always call it Graham's program. So leadership from Steve Graham on Caring for Missourians is another way of bringing people together for the better good of the state. So if you would join me in a round of applause and thanks for Steve Graham. Thank you. And the most challenging task he has is keeping IFC on task on any particular topic, but IFC also has come together with the support of our Title IX initiatives, as well as a workload policy for faculty. These are 2 significant changes and initiatives that are fairly dramatic moves from the IFC. So Steve continues to provide great leadership, and every now and then Hank assists him in what he does. In all seriousness, thanks, Steve. Also, a bit of thanks before I get into my comments, a huge thanks to Chancellor Schrader for the strategic update, your leadership, as well as thanks to your team for the wonderful hospitality that we've seen the last day and a half. It's always fun to come down to Rolla, and this was another learning moment and a great time to get together and see all the great things at S&T. So now let's get into my president's report. In previous Board of Curators meetings, I put up this slide of moving from good to great. It was a challenge that I made to the University of Missouri system leadership. It's the challenge that I made to the state. If you remember, I described good to great involves three main criteria or three main initiatives. It's one of leadership, it's one of innovation, and it's one of resources. And I'm happy to say that we've got some progress on that. When I say good to great, it's about not settling. It's not being comfortable with your success. If I was, let me make an analogy, if I was the chancellor of Duke, I would go up to Mike Krzyzewski and I'd say, Coach, congratulations on your recent NCAA win. You have 5. John Wooden has 10. What are you going to do next? But that is, and I'm sure you don't need to say that to Coach Krzyzewski because that's the way he is wired. And I would suggest that's the way we need to be wired as leaders, and that's the way we need to think from a state standpoint. So there's lots of great books that have been written about good to great. It's about realizing your potential. It's about setting aspirational goals. And when you achieve those aspirational goals, you move that goal higher. Curator Phillips identified some goals that were achieved or some goals that weren't that aspirational in that chart that Cheryl has identified. Cheryl's already started. We met it. Now we got to reset it. We met it. We need to reset it. And the other leaders across the system have to do the same thing. Also, since the last board meeting, there was an editorial that was in the paper that challenged the state to move from good to great and to make sure that we have the resources to move higher education as a critical component of the state becoming more competitive on the national basis. One of the things that happened after our last board meeting is post this editorial, we had a conversation with the leaders of all the 4-year institutions as well as leaders of all the 2-year institutions. The 2-year institutions being represented by MCCA, you can see in this letterhead, the 4 years being represented by COFI. Also, the Coordinating Board of Higher Education got into this conversation. I believe for the first time in maybe forever, everybody came together with a common message to our political leadership that economic development and economic prosperity and state competitiveness comes from investing in higher education. And this was a letter signed by everybody that went to both the Senate and House committees on education, and out of it, we're getting some great response. Earlier I said again, moving from good to great requires resources. Resources come from reallocating people or money or technology or whatever internally towards things that are more of a priority. Resources also come from partnerships, and the partnerships can come from relationships with political leaders, relationships with business leaders or individuals. We have great examples of partnership announcements recently that attracted more resources to the University of Missouri. A big thanks to Governor Nixon for releasing the withhold on one of the 50/50 projects, which is the experimental mines building here, $1.2 million. Again, the $1.2 that was required to complete the project was raised by the S&T leadership team. So this is a great project. We have we have 4 more of these. Actually, we have more than that in the pipeline, but we have 1 per campus, and we have some others that we're looking for future funding. But we hope if the revenue collections in the state of Missouri continue to get stronger, as we've seen in the previous month of March, there'll be more monies released, and hopefully more of these 50/50 projects will happen. The great thing about this announcement is we have one 50/50 funded, which will allow the many companies and individuals that contributed to the other projects, it gives them hope to stay in there and continue to work with us in influencing political leaders to fund those projects as well. The other partnership that we're proud of, where it attracted more resources, was the partnership with Cox and Mercy down in Springfield, and the partnership with the state. The governor released the incremental $5.3 million to fully fund the $10 million of the Cox Mercy partnership, which allows us to increase the class size of our great medical school in Columbia and do the residencies down in the Springfield area at the Cox Mercy campuses, and it allows us to put a big University of Missouri flag down in Springfield and just show visibly our commitment to that Southwest Missouri community as well. Also, that sends a signal to the Senate and to the House, and the Senate has put in that incremental $10 million for next year's budget. It sends a signal from the governor to the Senate and the House that I, Governor Nixon, think that this is an important initiative because I've put my money behind it by moving that withhold to that. So we're very, very encouraged and thankful to the governor, the Senate, and the House for supporting that partnership. And the teamwork with Cox Mercy, the civic leaders down in Springfield, plus our partner MSU with their occupational therapy investment and their occupational therapy program really brought to everybody's attention the importance of this initiative in the state. So the challenge that I have for the leaders is no different than the challenge for the system is no different than the challenge that we have for the state, which is we really, as citizens in this great state of Missouri, which I grew up in and I love, we've got to figure out what we want to stand for, and we've got to figure out what our priorities are, and we have to have a sense of urgency in funding these priorities or focusing on these priorities so that we can move from our current position. Before I get into what the next step is towards greatness or the next idea or the next concept that I've got, I want to put a little bit more context in terms of where we are as a state. This came from a recent report from the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. The Missouri Chamber of Commerce went out to hundreds of CEOs in the state of Missouri through a Gallup poll, and also had a consultant do some analysis on our relative position as a state compared to other states. As you can see, these statistics, they're quite alarming, and we as citizens of the state of Missouri should be concerned. Over the last 10 years, the employment growth of the state of Missouri, we're 42nd. Our GDP growth, we're 43rd. And our per capita income growth is 37th. These are very, very concerning statistics, and we're better than that, and we deserve to be in better shape than that. When the CEOs were asked as to why this is, one of the main reasons is they talked about the quality of the workforce and the quantity of the workforce in the state of Missouri was concerning to them as they look to the future and what their growth expectations are. So if that's the case, then we have to, as producers of that future workforce, do something different. So let's talk about what's going on. This is a chart I don't expect you to read from the back, so just bear with me and focus on the colors and the lines, not the numbers. So on the left side of that chart is what occurred with jobs in the recessionary period that we just recently experienced. On the right side of the chart, that's colored in gray, is post-recession. That blue line that's dropping like a rock is those jobs that require a high school education or less. The line in the red, which is that middle line, is those jobs that require an associate's degree, and the green line is those that require a baccalaureate degree or greater. As you can see, post-recession, what has happened is that blue line has stayed down. What national economists are saying is those jobs are gone and they're not coming back. What you see are the jobs that have come back, which are those that have the associate job or the associate requirement or the baccalaureate requirement. On top of that, DESE did a study that was reinforced by a federal study that in the future, 2/3 of the jobs that will be available to Americans require an associate degree or greater. And the fastest growing segment in that associate degree or greater educational segment for jobs, the fastest growing segment will be those that require a master's degree or greater. So if we're producing the future employees for these businesses located in Missouri and the businesses that want to be located in Missouri, we have got to step up our production of those with associate bachelor degrees and specifically master's or greater. So if that's the case, if that's the challenge for the state of Missouri, how are we positioned to address that problem? Or better said, how do we address that opportunity? Well, we've got an issue, and it's leaks in the education pipeline. Here are some statistics that we took out of the DESE statistics, and we graphed them in this simple chart. Currently, out of every 100 ninth graders, 78 end up graduating from high school, so you have leakage from 9th grade to 12th grade of people that just don't end up graduating. Then we lose from 78 to 48, many of them, about 30 of that 100, don't even go on to college, and then it goes down to those that graduate from college with either an associate's degree or baccalaureate degree of 22 of the 100 is pretty concerning. And when you put the actual statistics to how many students that means, that suggests that of the 71,000 that start off in 9th grade, only 15,000 end up 6 years post-high school with an associate or baccalaureate degree. If that doesn't give you pause, I don't know what does. We have some concerns that we've got to address in figuring out how to fix these leaks in the pipeline so that we've got more students graduating with an associate's or degree or greater, because that's where the jobs are in the state of Missouri as well as on a national basis. In addition to the leakages that we have in the total pipeline, when you go down to another level and you look at those students that are most academically prepared as measured by their grade point, and let's just call it a 3.0 in this analysis, we have 60,000 students graduate from high school last year. Of those, 28,000 had a 3.0 or greater. Of the 28,000 students that had a 3.0 or greater, 8,000 of those didn't even go to college. They just decided not to go on to college. Maybe they went into the workforce, not sure what happened. Then another 3,000 left the state of Missouri. So of the 28,000, 11,000 of our most academically prepared students, or 40%, have chosen not to go to a public university in the state of Missouri. So here's the challenge, and we all have challenges. The one, if I could capture this, is that if we want to be more competitive on the national basis, we all know we need more jobs, which will spur the economy, which will attract more businesses, that improves the quality of life and the participation of working age adults in their communities and in their schools. And we have to achieve progress against the goal of going from 36% of our working age adults to 60%. We are making minor improvements, not major improvements. We obviously have to fix the pipeline of students from pre-K all the way through college, and also inspire and encourage academic excellence. And lastly, if we can keep our best and brightest in the state of Missouri, data supports it that after graduation, they're most likely, if they graduate in an in-state school, they're most likely to take a job in-state, which again improves our competitiveness. So you look at those challenges and you wonder what other states are doing, or is there an opportunity for us to step up? I believe there is an opportunity for us to step up, but again, it goes back to leadership, innovation, and also resources appropriate. Let me just give you an example of a state that was in a similar situation. In Georgia, 21 years ago, the governor, Zell Miller, at the time decided to put the lottery opportunity on the ballot, but also earmark the funds from lottery towards a state-funded scholarship for higher education. It's called the Hope Scholarship, helping outstanding pupils educationally. Let's talk about what the design was and what has happened there. The design was really, really simple, is let's give those academically qualified students that aren't typically going to go to college because they can't afford to, a financial path towards going on to college. And we heard a lot of reasons, or a lot of the concerns from the retention panel that we had earlier about unfortunately students are dropping out because they can't afford to go to the next semester, or they're limiting their class load because they can't take the additional class or 3 hours because the cost is prohibitive. So that was the first objective. The second objective was to fix the brain drain, as they call it, which was the brightest leaving. In the state of Georgia, it had been, the governor hosted the valedictorians and salutatorians in his mansion for it's just a tradition down in Georgia. Every year they surveyed the salutatorians and valedictorians and asked them which, are they going to stay in state or leave? Before the Hope Scholarship, 30% of the students said that we're staying in state, 70% said we're leaving. Since Hope Scholarship's been in place, that's reversed itself. Now 70% of the best and the brightest students of each of the high school are now staying in state because of the Hope Scholarship, and 30% are leaving. The design of the Hope Scholarship was if you had a 3.0 or greater, you have a significantly discounted tuition and fees. If you had a 3.7, which is called the Zell Miller Scholarship, full tuition is paid. They've had to continue to modify it over the years as the demand increased for it and also the needs of the state changed, but it's still in place. What they have seen is people thought grade inflation would occur. And yes, grade inflation did occur. There was more people that were getting 3.0 or greater, but also their SAT scores went at the same time. So if your SAT scores is the measure of knowledge and achievement, and they're going up at 35%, then I don't have a problem with grades going up at the same basis. It's not really inflation. It's the reflection of there's something that's happened. There's some secret sauce that allows more knowledge to be absorbed and demonstrated as you take an SAT. Also, you have two public institutions in the state of Georgia that are in the top 20 public schools as defined by World News Report. One of them, Georgia Tech, was invited to the AAU. And you can see that 76% of their high-achieving students with a 1,500 or greater on SAT stay in state. That's a 53% improvement. Total enrollment went up. The other thing that is interesting is that they have attracted the North American headquarters for Mercedes and Caterpillar and NCR and all these, and a lot of them talk specifically about the Hope Scholarship being a difference maker in deciding to locate in the state of Georgia. So that's an example of a significant initiative, an investment that took place in the state of Georgia. So the concept that we're talking about now, I'm getting into the next step of our challenge to get from good to great, and our challenge to try to really move the needle on the economy in the state of Missouri and move the needle on the competitiveness of the state of Missouri. This concept is called Missouri Promise. What we're talking about, and I emphasize talking about because this is not in stone, is creating a cigarette tax that will be earmarked and funded no different than the lottery funds in the state of Georgia to the Hope Scholarship. This is going to be funded to Missouri Promise. There are 12 states right now that have a earmarked state-funded scholarship program for higher education. We would like to be the 13th. The principles that we're talking about right now is about reducing tuition, either eliminating or reducing tuition fees based on academic performance. Also, we need to make sure that as you look at the students that we're serving, address the traditional students, which are those that are coming from high school right into college, and those non-traditional students or those working age adults that have to come back and finish their degree or start that degree. And so we have to have a way to serve them. Also, we have to make sure that we recognize the importance of all our 2 years in our four-year institutions and make sure that the program addresses, puts the students, incents the students to go to the right 2-year or 4-year based on their academic credentials as well as their interests and needs. And also, the last point is we need to make sure that we have it an affordable model that is lasting. To do this, we are going to, right now, again, the concept is to create a constitutional amendment. And the constitutional amendment will be created similar to what's happened with the Conservation Commission, which has a dedicated tax, as well as transportation that has a dedicated tax. You'd have a dedicated tax that funds it. You have a governance or a board that makes sure that they're implementing this and meets the principles or goals that are defined earlier. Recognizing that you're going to have to tune and tweak this, not away from the principles and goals, but you have to tune and tweak it to make sure that it's affordable, and we're seeing additional results, and the additional results being quantity and quality of graduates in the state of Missouri. Because if we have a more educated citizenry in the state of Missouri, the odds of our being competitive on a national basis from a state perspective increase dramatically. So let me give you a quote on what the possibility of this concept called Missouri Promise might be. Researchers, this is a quote from the research piece that was done in 2002. This is eight years after the Hope Scholarship was put together. Researchers found that in addition to Hope increasing the number of students credited with high academic performance,
The program also was responsible for a reduction in the disparity in the academic performance of different racial groups. Overall, according to these researchers, HOPE seems to motivate students and their families to commit greater effort to schooling. Now, let me personalize this. I spent 10 years in Atlanta. My kids were in elementary school in the public school system in the state of Georgia. First grade, second grade, we're talking about Hope Scholarship as parents. First grade, second grade, students are talking about Hope Scholarship in first and second grade. Why? Because it's obvious. It is clear that if I perform, if I pay attention, if I perform in school, if I can get a 3.0 or greater, I know I can go to college in the state of Georgia. It brings parents and students together with a common purpose of let's achieve in K through 12 in a way that we can get into a college. Now, you can't get into all the colleges, the public colleges. If you achieve this, you still have to meet the academic standards of each of the individual students, each of the individual institutions. But you know college is in your future if you can achieve this particular grade point. It also can make these decisions and these challenges that students have about whether I can enroll the next semester that Jim Spain talked specifically about and Cheryl reinforced is I know that I can see an affordable path towards completion of college. And that's what this concept of the Missouri Promise offers to our state. So this is what I would propose as the next step of moving our state from good to great. Now, let's talk about how this becomes reality. Next week, we will be getting the leaders of all the four-year institutions together for a second time to make sure that we have alignment and commitment to this. We've had one conversation. We should finish this next week. The 2 years have already gotten together, and I think it's directionally correct. So once we have the higher education community committed to this, then we need to go out and raise the necessary funds to get the signatures, to get this on the ballot. We also have great political leadership support, and we're getting political leadership support on both sides of the House, so it can be as bipartisan an initiative as possible. The polling that's taken place suggests that this has a high opportunity of success, and we need our plan is to get this concept agreed to by all parties and get this on the ballot in November for 2016, and hopefully the voters will agree with all of us in this room that this is a good thing and that we should invest in this concept called Missouri Promise. For you all, since you were nice enough and kind enough to listen to me speak passionately about this, because I really believe this is going to be a big difference maker for the state, I ask you to share in this journey because we're going to need each and every one of you to extend your reach, buy into this program, ask you to participate in getting the awareness up, the interest up in this, and so that this becomes reality, not just a concept. And that once it's reality, it really allows that student to commit to the next semester because I now have the dollars necessary to not only go on to the next semester, but to graduate without killer debt. And so I can graduate, get a job, buy a car, get a house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and move on to being a very, very productive Missourian. So that's where we are. Thank you in advance for your help on this initiative. And as this concept becomes more reality, I'll continue to keep you informed on the progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Wolf. The next item is the consent agenda. Motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Any discussion? Cindy?
And Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that's approving that without item number 10, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Curator Cups?
Yes.
Curator Graham?
Yes.
Curator Henriksen?
Yes.
Curator Phillips?
Yes.
Curator Snowden?
Yes.
Curator Steelman?
Yes.
All votes in favor.
The last item on the public session is any suggestions for the good and the welfare of the board? Have any suggestions or comments?
You run a good meeting, that would be my comment. On
Thank you.
time.
I appreciate it.
He wasn't going to adjourn until somebody said
That's
that.
right. That being said, we will move into closed session. Do we need to vote to do that, or we're already there? Okay. Okay. That concludes the public session. Thank you very much.